Your parents are a bag of dicks. Getting high and playing video games is the best, and I will never sell you out ever.
You know, I always ask myself, how is Rick and Morty gonna top itself this week? To which the show says, Rick impregnated a planet. Try to wrap your head around that one, kiddos. Look, this was a fantastic episode of Rick and Morty when standing on its own. But in the grand scheme of things, this is absolutely one of the most important episodes for the characters and their family dynamic out of the entire series. And going off the promo for next week, this episode was essential in connecting the big themes of the season. But that warrants its own video you should stick around and subscribe for shortly after. For now, let's break down why the Childrick of Mort was perfect for checking in on the Smith family in a post-season 3 world where they no longer turn a blind eye and actually stick up to Rick. Spoilers ahead. Also, I just want to say these names are getting really weird and I feel goofier and goofier saying them alone into a microphone every day. Speaking of the title, I want to touch on the meaning of this episode's title, as it's one we speculated on, but because we ended up being off base, it just feels right to correct ourselves. The name Childrick of Mort parodies the movie Children of Men, a dystopian science fiction action thriller where 2 decades of human infertility has greatly impacted society for the worst. Childrick of Mort doesn't see an infertility problem, quite the opposite actually. A society being built from the ground up as a result of a clay baby boom, if you want to call them babies. They're kind of full grown, it's a little horrifying. This already on its own was an interesting concept. Rick made love to a planet, he pulled a reverse Guardians of the Galaxy, but just as we see throughout all of season 4, it's not about the gimmick of the story so much as about dealing with how the characters react to the premise. Rick Die Repeat was all about the lengths Morty will go to get with the girl he wants, as Rick puts himself through hell to ground Morty a bit and teach him a little perspective. Pro Mortyus utilized the non-linear storytelling to show that Rick and Morty haven't transcended to invincible duo who know everything. That Summer isn't someone they can just belittle, and sometimes they need her for the final piece of the puzzle. When you see that the talk of the town in every dimension is the Rick and Mortys, not the Rick, Morty, and Summers, it's good to see them being humbled a bit. Beth and Jerry, in terms of a large role, however, have been largely absent in a season that denies Rick and Morty a consequence-free universe without any struggles to overcome. Sure, they've been featured in episodes here and there, and even snag a B-plot, but it wasn't until this week where the team behind the show buckled down and made the case for these two to be respected by Rick and the audience. This episode was huge because it completes the turning point in the Smith family status quo. Morty and Summer weren't the focus of this episode, falling into a B-plot or technically C-plot if you count Rick and Beth doing their own thing. This was definitely an episode to develop the adults, getting straight to the point of what makes the characters tick. Jerry finally takes initiative and tries to earn the title of respectable individual. Beth finally makes Rick take responsibility for his more intimate actions and atone for his previous neglect, while Rick confronts a true god, a Zeus type, which ultimately illustrates how Rick differs from a run-of-the-mill almighty deity. And not to get corny, but the biggest difference is heart. More on that later, because right now I want to focus on Jerry's journey in this episode, and how it built upon smaller moments from earlier this season that'll really stand out if you decide to go back and binge this season all at once. I'm not going to fault anyone who's forgotten Jerry's previous appearance in this season, especially with all the hiatuses thrown at us, but this episode really was the culmination of multiple episodes. Throughout season 4, Jerry has been trying to earn the one thing he feels as if he should already have: respect from his family. He's tired of being the punching bag, the butt of the joke, the easy target that he's been since day one. Ever since Rick has been living with the Smith family, he's been the man of the house, despite Rick being the deadbeat walkout. We often laugh at how pathetic, spineless, aimless, bland, and some other fifth insult Jerry is, but be in his shoes for a second. Sure, you can't hold down a job, but you try to be an active member of your family who looks out for your kids, but the admiration goes towards the father of the love of your life, who fumbles around drunk all day. Rick has this cynical approach to life you think Jerry would harbor, but instead Jerry has been making strides to avoid that fate. In the season premiere, Jerry stands his ground against Rick, putting Morty's safety first, demanding Rick cuts it off with the quote anime bullshit. In The Old Man in the Seat, Jerry helps Gluty develop an app in hopes of admiration from his family. Morty and Summer are glued to their technology, so how cool would it be for their dad to be behind a successful app that only makes their lives better? But then of course, it horribly backfired, like most things for this poor man. Claw and Hoarder had the entire deal with the talking cat that invited Jerry not to overthink things, and Jerry more or less gets traumatized just for having a curious mind, and probably wanted to have his own personal win, deciphering a cryptic sci-fi scenario of his own, only to be given a mental breakdown. Rick literally had to wipe his mind. It was messy. Rattlestar Galactica had Jerry on a sky-high adventure when he just wanted to hang Christmas lights, a burning desire to prove to his family he can handle such a task that goes completely off the rails. But by the end, he manages to save his bacon. Primordia saw Jerry trying to earn respect in subtle ways, or at least it would have been subtle before his tantrum, starting up beekeeping and farming his own honey that he keeps in his own bottle labeled Jerry's own. But no one's really impressed except Summer's friend who wants to bang him, though I guess that makes it a win for Jerry, albeit a very weird one, probably illegal as well. well. That brings us to this week, where as Summer calls out, Jerry realizes in order to earn respect from his family, he has to level the playing field. No technology, no escapism, no sci-fi weirdness, just the Smith family roughing it in nature. Of course, with an innate lack of respect and typical Jerry luck, he first finds himself at a loss, until he stumbles into the company of the unproductives, children whom Rick really doesn't see a use for in his new society. It's not hard to draw the parallels between these rejected and Jerry. Jerry's crowning moment arrives not when he leads an army of the unproductives into Rick and Beth's society, or when he's infused with the powers of a god, but when he uses the power of camping to save Beth's life. Jerry has a pattern of talking his shit but then falling flat on his face, but the pattern is broken here. If it wasn't, Beth would be channeling her inner Black Widow as a pancake on Gaia's floor. It's one thing for Jerry to say camping is cool. Camping teaches you survival skills, and it's another for his point to actually be proven. Morty and Summer gain respect for their father through their natural realization that they have no survival skills, and that there's truth in Jerry's transparent excuse for attention. And to top it all off, Jerry admits the obvious for once in his life. He lets the kids know they were right about their assessment, even though they're more concerned with the fact that he briefly ascended into godhood. Character shifting in status is one thing that Rick and Morty actually commits to, and Jerry is in much better grace after this episode compared to where it began. He's no longer Jerry the pathetic tryhard who talks just to be heard without anything to really say. Now he's Jerry the slightly less pathetic tryhard who actually has something to say and a point to be made. Something that will only harm Rick's grasp on the family in the long run, because now that everyone knows Jerry can make a good point, his longest running point on Rick being a detriment to the family may be validated by the rest of the family. Enough about Jerry though, let's switch over to Beth, who despite being the key player in this entire episode, doesn't really go through a significant change, but rather is expanding on the breakthroughs made at the end of season 3. Beth isn't just smart, she's the daughter of Rick Sanchez, but she kind of resents that on account of her father being absent for so long, giving into his every whim in hopes of approval. But here the tables are turned, just as they began to turn at the end of season 3. Beth drives the story of this episode that cannot be understated. With her newfound power over Rick's decision, she forces him to do the one thing Rick tries so hard to avoid on a day-to-day basis: take accountability. Beth has been wounded by Rick's method of parenting, which is to not parent at all. But let's save that for his section. Beth is a poster child for abandonment and doesn't want Rick to get off scot-free by enabling an environment where these children grow up without any guidance from their father, causing them to develop the issues and complexes that are found within Beth. Simply put, Beth doesn't want any more Beths. She's beginning to utilize the power she has over Rick as his daughter in order to instill mortal obligation. That doesn't work out in the way that she expected it to, but again, that's for a different section. Beth also uses her brains to develop a society alongside Rick, and he seriously gives Beth the credit she deserves. This isn't Rick taking the reins to realize Beth's vision, this is cooperation and teamwork. Beth put in just as much work as Rick in developing this project, fulfilling more of the long sought after father-daughter bonding that she was snubbed of for years. And it's bonding that makes both of them happy. Rick wasn't thrilled about the idea at first, but he's very much into it once the ball is rolling. Yet we can't deny that Beth still has a bit of progression to make when it comes to her dedication in regards to Rick. Sure, she recognizes she's an Achilles heel that Rick doesn't have the balls to ignore, but she's melting over every compliment, every satisfying gratulatory remark that comes out of her father's mouth. She even defends his alcoholic tendencies, chalking it up to, well, if you were Rick, you'd drink too, which makes sense because we know Beth has a drinking problem of her own. Or at least she did, until the entire clone thing, where it hasn't come up again. Wait, has Beth seriously not drank at all since the clone thing? Is that a hint? That is to say, specifically, Beth hasn't stress drank, which is something she was known to do in the past. At the end of the day, Beth is getting better, but she's still too attached to her father to make entirely sound judgments. However, she consistently sticks up to him in this episode, even sticking up for Jerry at the very end, a move Rick did not appreciate. Let's finally talk about the man, the myth, the legend himself, Rick Sanchez. This season has not hit the bricks once when it comes to subversion, and Childrick of Mort comes into play with Rick's feelings towards this entire situation. Rick knocking up a planet and dealing with even more kids is such a fascinating premise, but Rick didn't really give a damn about the offspring. He says as much to the Zeus type. He just cared about making Beth happy. Even if the kids actually did come from Rick, he wouldn't have viewed them as his children. Rick boned a lot of people in a lot of realities. I'm sure his roster of children varies from dimension to dimension. To Rick, his only child is Beth, because she's the one constant in every single one of those timelines.
God, yes, I'm one of infinite Beths with infinite fathers and infinite universes. It's called a hug, Dad. It won't kill you.
These clay people, they don't matter to him. Jerry standing his ground may matter, but not as much. Morty and Summer going out on their own. Rick knows they can take care of themselves. They're his grandchildren. Rick just wants to stay in his daughter's good graces, and not for malintent. We also get a great understanding of Rick's tactics and mindset as a parent, and what separates him from other gods in the bigger components of this episode. Rick finally goes toe-to-toe with another god, a legitimate deity, Rick and Zeus. Can I call him Zeus? Are we on the same page? page when it comes to being an absent father. If they're active, the children develop to be spineless, lacking real character and tenacity. We know Jerry had both parents in his life, and look at him. However, where they differ is that Rick actually cares about his children. Rick wants his daughter to be as capable and resourceful as him without being around, unlike how the unproductive needed power from Zeus to get anywhere. This is best portrayed during the standoff between Rick and Zeus, where Rick pleads for the city to be left intact, regardless of the fate of the children, because it's important to Beth. And Beth, even Rick doesn't really want to admit, is an equal, which is who he raised her to be. Rick doesn't want to raise sheep like Jerry. Despite his control issues, he wants his family to be in the big leagues, to be kept up and hang with him. But Beth is the one closest to that level. We know Morty has a long way to go, as shown with, well, most of the season, but Beth growing a backbone and making it clear that the family doesn't need Rick to survive is how Rick knew she was not someone to belittle, but to respect. And I love this standoff. Rick and Morty incorporating action sequences, even to provide levity, is amazing, and more adult animated series need to follow their lead. Rick has attachments. He wants to raise a strong family and chill with them, and that's what separates him from the other gods. If you ask me, there will be greater ramifications for Rick, Morty, and Summer killing a god. Rick Sanchez has only gained the attention of sci-fi specific threats, but the affairs of gods have been removed for the most part. It may not be this season or even next season, but eventually, the writers may revisit this plot thread. Who knows, maybe Rick and Morty turning to religion to get them out of facing evil Morty wasn't as un-Rick and Morty as we were led to believe. Don't take that seriously. We all watch Never Rick and Morty. But guess what? Just like any other character on the show, we don't care. We speculate anyways. Finally, I want to bring all this together and touch on the ending scene and promo for next week's season finale, because Jerry seemed to finally earn genuine respect from his family. One of Rick's digs at Jerry finally falls flat, as Beth doesn't just stick up for her husband, but goes so far as to tell Rick that she was impressed with Jerry, and that Jerry did more in protecting Beth than her own father. Rick, the smartest man in existence, lost to an idiot. Again, giving a similar vibe to the final moment in season 3, where a similar situation left Rick bitter and speechless. Here, however, he doesn't bite his tongue, distracting his impending L by ratting out Morty and Summer's escapades, throwing it back at Beth and Jerry for their parenting skills. These digs are important, because all we've received from next season's finale is the information that the family may attend a group therapy session, once again digging back up season 3's arc. You guys thought it was over? We were just done dealing with the ramifications of the most controversial season? Think again. A lot has changed in the family dynamic of the Smith family since our last season, and that one fact is why you should look at this episode with the utmost importance. Beth and Jerry aren't just being drowned out by Rick anymore, which means no one would hold back in therapy, especially in a season where Rick and Morty have been more at odds than ever. We truly believe that this season has been building to some sort of ending, and this finale could be the thing that proves it, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. As always though, we want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Did you like this episode? Did you agree with what we said? Let us know in those comments down below, or tweet to us at Roundtable Vids, or me at @StretcherNemo. If you want to consider helping out the Roundtable, you can support us on Patreon or become a member of the channel and get exclusive access to scripts and avatars. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the Roundtable for more incredible cartoon content. I'm Nemo, this is Rick and Morty Breakdown, and I will see you next time. Peace.